All right, so today we're going to talk a little bit about making lids. So I'm going to throw a form to be the bottom half of a jar, or I guess the body of a jar, not necessarily the bottom half, but the body of the jar. And I'll talk about how I'm going to make a gallery for the inside of the lid to sit down into. And then I will make a lid, and then I'll make a variety of lids. Talk about making lids, talk about making knobs, and then trimming lids to fit. So I'm just gonna kind of quickly rough out a body of a shape. I'm gonna go for kind of like a gourd-like cookie jar kind of shape. As you know, the shape of this, the feel of this is kind of up to you, of what you make. You just need to make something thoughtful and interesting. So I can think the bottom of this a couple of different ways, right? Again, we can make something with a nice big flat bottom, or we can make something that needs to be trimmed. We can trim if it's just too thick and too heavy, or we can plan it out kind of like a bowl and have it, again, kind of making it that rounder globe-like shape. We could just go a big flat jar, but again, we want to make sure that we're throwing things thin and even, or going back and trimming them down to an appropriate thickness if our skills aren't there yet. But this one I'm going to trim. At least the outside shape of it, I don't necessarily need a foot ring on the inside. So as I start pulling this, I know that I'm going to shape it. I'm going to throw kind of a cylinder and then shape it. But I need to make sure that my rim stays really nice and thick. So normally as I pull, I would get to the top and kind of stop there and try and even it out. But instead of going all the way to the top, I'm just going to mainly try and stop a little bit below, maybe a quarter of an inch or so below, depending on how deep of a lid I want. And kind of as I make that, you'll see what that means. We can also talk about ways to make things, lid galleries, bigger if we want. But I know that I'm going to leave this thicker and also make sure, again, as always, it's really well compressed. And again, that's going to matter more here in a little bit. But now I'm just going to throw like normal. And again, so I'm going to ease up right there. You can see that line that's being made. And I'm going to compress this really well. This is for as much as I'm going to shape it. This is probably a good couple pulls to stop at. So I'm going to go ahead and shape. First I'm going to compress with a rib and then kind of start shaping as I go. Again, I'm just kind of pushing that in a little bit. It didn't really thin out at all. But I'm just trying to get more parallel form, something like that. So to belly this out, I'm going to leave my rib on the outside, and I'm going to be pushing out with my inside hand gently and as evenly as I can. But my rib's staying on the outside because as I push out from the inside, the clay is gonna naturally want to stretch, maybe even tear a little bit. But the rib's gonna help compress all of that down. When shaping this, you know, this isn't, I'm gonna keep going basically. You know, I don't need to try and shape this all in one motion. I can kind of do a few turnarounds of it. So as I'm going to compress this, and as I'm doing that, let's get that hydrated. So you can see this rim is, you know, much thicker than it normally would be, much flatter than it would normally be. I leave it flat because I'm going to go ahead now and push in the gallery to change this form. First I'm going to take the water out because it's going to be really hard once I do this to put my hand inside. And so I want to make sure that I don't leave any water inside. I don't want to encourage any cracking or anything like that. So I'm going to grab my, let's grab this one. Grab this wooden rib. Wooden rib will work. Really anything that has this, who can see this? There it is. You know, that nice 90-degree angle is what I'm going to use to create my gallery. Essentially what I'm going to try and think about is splitting this rim in half. So I'm going to try and find the halfway point across the top here, and then just gently start pressing down. Like so. And so you can see up here on the overview, we got this nice flat spot now. Let's see if we can kind of see what we're talking about now with the inside of that gallery. You know, basically what we're looking for is a flat spot for our rim to sit, and then a nice hard angle in there, and before the vertical. And this is what I was talking about, we can kind of alter this height a little bit. If I wanted to keep, if I had made this thick enough or tall enough or thick enough to where I could just keep pushing this down, I could get a taller gallery to happen. I personally don't really like a really tall gallery. So one other thing that I want to make sure that I do, if you can see this vertical part, you know, there's a flat part and a vertical part making this kind of L shape. So I'm just gonna flare that out just a little bit. Doesn't need to be a lot. And then I'm gonna come back and compress both these areas. And if I wasn't, you know, if I was to, you know, get this to be so, this flat part to be so wide that it was too wide, I could cut this back with the needle tool. Same with the height of this if I thought it was too tall. You know, if we want to think about an end product of something we can reach inside of. So this is done for right now. I'm gonna go ahead and cut this off. Jars are another thing. If you're not very comfortable picking up things off the wheel, they can be really helpful to make on bats. Because after I make my lids and everything becomes leather hard, I'm gonna actually trim the lid directly on the jar and use that as a chuck. So sometimes leaving these on bats can be helpful for that, but I know I want to trim the bottom of this, so I'm gonna go ahead and take this off. So use bats if you would like. Oh, before I take it off though, speaking of lids, we need to talk about how we're going to figure out how big of a lid to make. And so what we need to think about is how to figure out what this interior dimension is. And so like I mentioned before, we just want that bottom part where it's like the flat is starting to rise into the vertical. You know, we don't want where it flares out. We want to make sure that it fits and really nests down inside of there. And so similar to our stack pieces, we can use calipers. So if I grab 2 of these calipers, the first one I'm going to take and just very gently measure that interior corner from side to side. And once I have that, again, this is something that, you know, you might find that you're going to ruin a couple lids through trimming them or just drop them, or anything can happen. You might have to remake them. So having these marks the size of this gallery inside of your sketchbook next to your sketches is a really good idea. And now I can come and take a second set of calipers and measure this distance. Okay. And then this is the distance, this is the caliper I'm going to use to gauge the size of my lid that I make. So we also have, over at the bookstore at the google.com, they have these red tools, which are what are called lid masters. And essentially it is just that tool, 2 calipers in one. So I can use this side on my interior. And then when I go to make my lid, I have the distance right there, and I don't have to fumble around with 2 different calipers. So let me move this, and I will make some lids.